Welcome to Rainmakers, where we cover the world, and fortunately we are getting the world covered for us by Reeta Roy, who is the Executive Director and President and CEO of the Mastercard Foundation. I'm here with Gail Romero, the Executive Producer of Rainmakers, and this is part two, Gail. And in this we're talking an awful lot about women and girls and their financial issues. It's different from issues that men and boys have, right?
Well, it is, because women typically don't have access to funding. They don't have access to capital. They don't have access to the family's money. And so it's very difficult for them to take care of the family, because typically what happens is women are the ones who are the providers, yet they don't have the money.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Around the world, and it's been this way, I think, in any culture that develops. It has certainly happened in the United States as well, that women will, whenever they have money, they will take care of their families first, whereas men spend it on other things.
You're absolutely right. So here's a good story that illustrates this. And this is a story that Reeta Roy actually told on her blog about a young woman who's 26 years old in sub-Saharan Africa. Actually, she's in the nation of Ghana. It's very important to understand the culture there. When a husband dies, the family will come and take everything that the family has and put it back into the husband's side. So the woman is left with no home, no means of support, and she's thrown out with her children.
The children the children aren't supported at all?
No. Sometimes a family, an uncle may take the children on. In most cases, no. So this one woman, this story is amazing. She actually went out at 26 with 2 children and took a loan, a small loan, that she then used to actually buy used clothing and started a used clothing store. And this store actually now supplies the wherewithal for their family to survive.
So this was a microfinance loan, which is exactly something that what the Mastercard Foundation is trying to do to help more and more microfinance funding to happen throughout low and middle income countries.
Absolutely. And this woman's family now, she has a place to live, she has food for her children, and they have a roof over their head and a future.
I remember talking with someone a few years ago about one of the nations in Africa is requiring that all children, boys and girls, have to be educated through the 9th grade. And I asked this question, okay, so I said, what happens to a girl when she gets a 9th grade education? What happens to her? And the response was, well, she becomes a more educated mom. But that's not what Mastercard Foundation and all of the different partners that they have are trying to do. They're trying to have it so that girls and women have the same opportunities that men have.
You know, you're absolutely right. Rwanda is one country where they have mandated that girls actually are educated through the 9th grade. But what we're seeing now is that those girls that go on to high school who have an opportunity, if they learn some technical skills, to actually bring money back into the family rather than being traded for cattle.
Well, and the traded for cattle, by the way, for those of you, that's a specific reference to Vivian Onano, who is someone who we interviewed here on Rainmakers in the past, and I encourage you to go and watch that interview too. We're only about 15 seconds away from part 2 of the Reeta Roy interview. And Gail, incredibly impressed with the substance of the information that Reeta Roy provides. So without any further ado, let's go to Reeta Roy right here on Rainmakers. This is part 2. What's the Foundation's role in helping to provide that access to capital and to helping young entrepreneurs grow?
We work primarily through partners, partner organizations like BRAC, like Opportunity International, like Camfed. And so a huge part of our work is to create a supportive network, which is nurturing, which is supportive of young people as they transition through different life stages. And so we're working with some organizations, for example, BRAC in Uganda. We have made a substantial investment in BRAC, close to $20 million, to expand microfinance across Uganda. A large proportion of the microborrowers are actually people under the age of 30. And in fact, about 14% of them are between the ages of 18 and 25. And so these are young people who are, mostly young women, who are already economically active. And what we are trying to do is to also ensure they don't just receive access to finance, but they also receive access to knowledge and learning and skills and training so that they can develop livelihoods, options for themselves, and better ways to actually use that finance to improve their lives.
So what are some of your favorite examples of businesses that have developed out of this entrepreneurship program with BRAC?
There are so many, and so I will touch on a couple of them. I was just in Uganda in the beginning of October visiting several women's groups, and I met a woman who I would say is in her 40s, and I'll talk to you about her daughter in a second, who started out by selling matoke. Matoke is like a sweet potato. It's like a root vegetable. And she began by selling it. And today, she's actually selling to she's become a wholesaler of sorts. She didn't use that term, but she's become a supplier to other women who sell in the market. And so I started to ask her about how her life has changed. And the first thing she did was she started to talk about her family. And she talked about her daughter, who's going to medical school, which was phenomenal. I would not think of a woman selling matoke in the market, educating a young woman. And right there, Stan, you could see the generational change, the transformation that's going to happen for that family, for that community. She talked about how it had given her the dignity and made her an equal in the eyes of her husband. And that he saw value in her because she was bringing income into the house. And if I don't know if that isn't entrepreneurship, and if that isn't a life transformed and a family with now more economic options, then I don't know what is. But to me, that stuck in terms of what's happening in one particular woman's life. And I have met lots of them who can talk about how their lives are changing.
Well, the transformation that you just talked about is phenomenal because not only is it economic and educational, but it's cultural too.
Yes.
And not all the time cultural changes are easy to have happen though, right?
Absolutely. I think they're always cultural barriers. And at the same time, I think we have to really listen again to when many poor families or poor households make very rational decisions. They make rational decisions about why they keep girls at home, because they need someone who's active, who can help with household chores or help on the farm. They make decisions between which child to send to school. And from their point of view, it's about the well-being of the whole family. It's about survival today as opposed to thinking about long-term planning. And so much of our work is about trying to create opportunities where we create options where they can be in the driver's seat and take decisions which not only address today's needs, but also address the well-being of the family tomorrow and their grandchildren for day after tomorrow.
You talk about on the website, and this is just related to Uganda, but I'll bet that you can talk about it with regard to other parts of Africa, but girls' dreams. And you know, in the United States, you may think that the girl's dream is something completely different than the girl's dream here in the United States. Mm-hmm. But is it similar?
I would say, and I come back again, the dreams themselves may be slightly different in terms of what they express, whether it's to go to school, whether it's to, as one little girl told me when I was visiting a slum in Kenya, in Nairobi, to get a pink dress for Christmas. Or another young woman talking about the dream that she could actually build a toilet, not for herself, but for her mother. And when I think about what these universal themes mean, it's all about having a dream for a better life and a productive life. And it's about having a life where they can provide for themselves and also for their families.
Now, your partnership with BRAC has been very transformative for many people. They have a computer training center that has been funded in part through the Mastercard Foundation.
Yes.
Where is that?
I was just there. Actually, I had a chance to visit the first cohort of young women who have gone through that computer training. And 4 days before that training, none of them, because I asked them, none of them had ever seen, they'd heard about a computer, but they had never seen one, and they had never touched one. And in fact, when I asked them, what were your thoughts, many of them said, oh, we were afraid, we weren't sure how we should approach the computer. And I have to say, the fourth day I was there, they were giving us demonstrations of how to use Word, how to use Excel, which I have to say, Excel, I was extremely impressed. They were giving us not only just demonstrations of their mastery of the computer and the software, but what had taken hold was their own ideas about the possibilities of what they could do. And when I asked them, so what will you do with this knowledge? How could you make some money with this knowledge? Oh my gosh, I just got a whole blast of ideas. Well, we can do flyers for people, we can print letters, we can send emails for people in our village, and we can charge them. And it suddenly opened up a whole network of possibilities. It was empowering. And it was empowering to see them realize that they had new knowledge, and that new knowledge created new value for them.
Now, my parents told my sisters, and I have told my daughters, that there is nothing that you can't reach. There's nothing that you can't attain. Are there barriers to success that young businesswomen have in Africa and in other lower income countries that we don't have here?
Oh, I don't think we have enough time in this interview to cover all the issues. Yes, there are enormous obstacles for women. Some of them are cultural. Many of them, frankly, are economic. And we all know that women, particularly in Africa, bear a disproportionate burden of poverty. And yet they're the same women who are out there farming the land, they're feeding their children. 70% of their unpaid time is making sure that the workforce in Africa is fed, healthy, and able to function. They may till about 80% of the land, but they get access to less than 10% of the credit. It's a disparity, it's a gap, again, which needs to be closed. And part of that closing that gap comes with education, but the other piece of it comes with access to capital, access to knowledge, so that people can meet others on their own terms, and they can meet others as equals.
Here at Rainmakers, we have heard a lot of people talk about a story similar to yours, whereas young women do so much more of the work and bear so much more of the burden, but they don't get hardly anything in return, including from their own cultures. Is there a role for men and boys?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, where are they? Why aren't they carrying the water?
I don't know why they aren't carrying the water, but I have to say that we do know, as one of the farmers who I visited in Uganda told me, a woman farmer, when you invest in me, you invest in my village. And that was very powerful for me. I think as a foundation, which is particularly very, very focused on young people, and the fact that we live in such a diverse, diverse world, so much of what we need to do is invest in young men and young women. And in fact, that's what many of our programs associated with young people do. We need to begin to invest in the ability to see themselves as leaders and see themselves as agents of change. And I think that's how large change will come about.
Another one of your programs is is Reach Up and the Digital Opportunity Trust.
Yes, DOT, as we call them.
DOT. Tell us about that.
DOT is an organization which I have to say hasn't had its fair share of limelight. It is a phenomenal organization with a very, very simple idea. And the idea is that if they can provide every young person with access to not only just a computer, but access to knowledge about how to use a computer. And it's knowledge, Stan, which isn't anything fancy. It's about how to prepare a resume, how to think about an idea and plot it out, whether it's on an Excel spreadsheet or some other program. It's about applied knowledge, but in an IT, high-tech world, even though they may be living in a developing country. And DOT is unique because it's an organization that uses young people to lead other young people. And it's a model which is what we would call peer-to-peer. DOT trains a group of young people who have recently graduated from university, sends them back to their community, where they work with local organizations, mobilize other young people who are learning, who are interested in acquiring ICT skills, or as we call it, information communication technology skills, and trains them for a period of 5 to 6 weeks. And these young graduates from the program then get to move on and look for jobs with their new skills. And what we're hearing is that a network then starts to form almost organically. of alumni of the programs who then help each other, and they help each other just by mentoring each other, being supportive of each other, but also finding new jobs. And so when I went to visit a little community in Mataru in Kenya, I was so taken by, in Matu in Kenya, I was so taken by this program and its simplicity and yet its infinite scalability. And so we're partnering with DOT to help them make Kenya the regional hub and to expand the program not only in Kenya but also in Rwanda.
One of the two big announcements from the Mastercard Foundation at CGI 2010 was the partnership you have in Kenya and Equity Bank. Describe that.
Okay, the Equity Group Foundation is the philanthropic arm of Equity Bank, which is the largest microfinance bank in East Africa. In fact, probably the largest microfinance bank in Africa. We are doing two things with them. The first piece is about partnering with the bank and the foundation to mobilize what we would call a massive financial literacy program, which is aimed at women as well as aimed at young people, young men and young women. And so over the next 3 years, we hope to reach almost 700,000 young people and women across Kenya. And it's a program which is going to equip them not only with financial skills, but at the point of access, enable them to access financial services through the bank. And this would really absolutely, what I would call, bring into such a practical manner, enable people to access services, but also with the knowledge of how to use those services. So that's one thing which we're very, very excited about. The second thing which we're working on with the bank is, and the foundation, is to really make a dent in the area of secondary education. We see secondary education as this giant gulf. There's been so much work, thanks to the MDGs, to push and to promote primary education. But so many young people, I would say less than 30% of them, ever move from primary school to secondary education. And you know what would happen if a whole nation, let alone a whole continent, were constrained at less than an 8th grade education. There's no way a country or a region can compete and can develop. And so what we're doing is working together with Equity Group Foundation to invest in a comprehensive secondary school education program. So that is full scholarships, room and board, money for shoes, money for books, pocket money, transportation, as well as leadership development skills, which focus on self-esteem, community service, the fundamentals of what it takes to finish secondary school. And we're hoping over the next 5 years to be able to move a group of young people through secondary school completion.
So I can see what's so exciting about that. Whose idea was that? Was that yours?
I have to say we were extremely inspired by Equity Group Foundation and the leader of Equity Bank, Dr. James Mwangi, who is another amazing individual who grew up, and I think the first time he told me he ever owned a pair of shoes was when he was 11. And thanks to his mother, who really invested and who struggled, and who sacrificed, but who invested in his education, he is where he is today. And he always says that if I can do it in one lifetime, come from a place of absolute poverty and be the leader of the largest bank in Africa, then anyone else can do it. Everyone else should have that opportunity to be able to do something like this. So in many ways, he's the inspiration behind this program.
Another big announcement from the Mastercard Foundation at CGI 2010 was with Camfed in Ghana and Malawi.
That's right.
That's a very exciting program. Tell us about that.
That's right. First of all, Ann Cotton is another inspirational leader. And she is not only an inspirational leader in terms of what she's done, but that she's set an example for many other organizations to recognize that they can make a dent in the area of girls' education, and particularly girls' education in Africa. We are partnering with them in both Malawi and in Ghana to actually scale up their efforts. This is going to be a $10 million investment on the part of the foundation in not only enabling young women to finish secondary school, but also to train many, many young women and put them through courses around financial literacy And what is particularly exciting, as you know, Camfed works with extremely impoverished communities, very, very rural, very remote communities. The focus is on looking at what kinds of jobs could be created when these young women finish school. And so what we're doing is we're experimenting with different types of opportunities. Some of it focuses on green technology, others focus on other means of self-employment. But we're very, very excited about that program.
So much of the Mastercard Foundation's work is with youth and helping to create better futures for them than what they are inheriting. Unfortunately, one of the things that they are inheriting is a huge debt and a huge impact on the infrastructure as a result of cancer, global cancer. Is there a role of the Mastercard Foundation in helping youth overcome infrastructure-related issues, difficult economic issues relating to a health problem, a huge health problem such as cancer?
Now, while we're not a foundation which is directly investing in healthcare, I would say that part of the solution is making sure that young people are part of that solution in the future. I think we all can appreciate that healthcare is a critical part of any household, and particularly for households living on $2 a day. They spend a huge percentage of their income on securing their health, and any kind of setback, any kind of catastrophic event would be a huge shock to the household. We also appreciate the fact that the health of a population is a key contributor to economic growth, to social progress, and healthcare itself is a huge piece of the economy. So when I think about an infrastructure that is in need of being much more responsive, that clearly is the area, a role where government can play a massive role. But at the end of the day, an investment in infrastructure is also an investment in a skilled workforce. And so when I think about the needs of many developing countries, clearly it creates new opportunities for young people to think about careers in healthcare. And whether that means becoming doctors, becoming nurses, paramedics, midwives, public health officers, it creates new opportunities where they can earn a living, but also deliver a very vital community service.
So the woman in her 40s who was talking about her daughter who was going to medical school, is that an example?
That could certainly be one example. One of the programs which we work with Equity Bank, a group foundation, as we mentioned a moment ago, is to educate young people through secondary school. When I ask them today, these are young people who come from extremely vulnerable families, who have great academic promise, but are set back because of the circumstances of their household, the economic circumstances. And these are young people who never thought they would even have a chance to go to secondary school. I just met with a group of them in August, and when I asked them about their dreams, the first thing they said was, if I do well in school, will you pay for my opportunity to go to university? Will you enable me to seek further study? It was probably the best day of my life, because more than anything else, it told me that they saw a pathway forward. And when I asked them, what would you like to do? What would you like to study? A huge group talked about wanting to become doctors, engineers, a couple mathematicians, a few computer geeks, but many of them talked about healthcare, because they see that. They see that as a reality around them, in their families, and they see that as a critical need for their country to develop.
Whenever I hear anybody talking about access to capital, immediately here in the United States I think about, oh, we're talking big dollars. But in reality, Gail, the amount of money that Reeta is talking about with microfinance is small, and it's helping people not only create jobs for themselves and their families and their communities, but it is a natural evolution of an economy, it seems to me.
Well, I think you've got it spot on. What happens are some of these loans are only $50 or $100. They're not enormous amounts of money. But when you're looking at a country like Uganda, you're looking at 4 million people, only 10% of them actually have access to banks.
10%, so the other 90% have cash in their pockets, which sounds to me like it's crime central.
Well, as Reeta said, they put their money in their shoe. And so consequently, absolutely, thievery is a common everyday occurrence, and you may have $10 saved today, and tomorrow you may have nothing.
Well, so the access to capital, they can't do it themselves because Mastercard, that's just not the way that they work. So instead, what they do is they work with organizations like BRAC and the Digital Opportunity Trust and others. How do they work?
Well, BRAC actually started out with Sir Fazal Abed in Bangladesh and is now all over the world. And so they're really focusing with micro finance, currently in Uganda with BRAC, and they're going to establish 129 new financial institutions, if you will, branches of these banks. They partner with them, and it allows them who do the work and who can actually provide extra funding and monitor the process. So Mastercard puts in $45 million, BRAC takes care of the rest, and they take care of all the management of everything.
Now this is the Mastercard Foundation, so these are actually nonprofit funds.
Correct. So BRAC then takes that money, and then when you consider that they have to pay back their loans, those loans establish the other 90% of their corpus money in return so they can lend it to others.
Yeah, now some people will bristle when they hear us talking in a positive way about a big giant, a corporation like Mastercard and getting involved in funding for people at the low end of the economic pyramid. But in reality, what they're doing is they are enabling people at that stage, at that part of the spectrum, to build themselves up.
Well, they are, but let's be real clear. Mastercard as a corporation is completely separate from Mastercard Foundation. Mastercard Corporation does not have anything really to say about what Mastercard Foundation does. They're completely separate entities. But in reality, it was just great social responsibility for a large corporation to put some money aside to change the world.
Now there's some other things that Mastercard Foundation has been involved with, the Digital Opportunity Trust, and I think it's Opportunity International?
Right, and Opportunity International, I'm going to check my notes here real quick, was a Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates and the Mastercard Foundation partnered together with Opportunity International to provide financial access to 1.4 million people in the rural poor in Africa. And they did $16 million for this. And it's very interesting because rural farmers don't have access to funds either. And so they can't buy seeds and fertilizers. And there's a great story on the MastercardFoundation.org website. It's the MastercardFoundation.org, where you can find the story about an individual who actually did great work by not only, he used to grow just cocoa with his loan, he then started growing palm oil, and so if one crop goes up and the other one's down, he actually has an economy for his family and his community.
Again, a natural evolution of an economy. So we've come to the end of part 2 of our 3-part interview with Reeta Roy, the head of the Mastercard Foundation. Incredibly interesting, so much more information out there. The biggest thing of all, it's all about opportunity. We'll see you next week on Rainmakers TV. Take care.
Thank you.